people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at houseparks.com.
I don't care for you if it's a putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn pus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back to the show. Joining us from Lviv, our dear friend Philip Ittner is actually, it's amazing.
Hey, no. Kiev. I'm in Kiev today.
Oh, you're in Kiev. I thought you were going to Lviv.
Just got here today.
Fantastic.
No, I was in Lviv this morning. I'm in Kiev today. I'm in Kiev tonight.
See, that's how he gets you.
Yeah, and he does. And by the way, you know what I mean when I say this, but thank you for the pickles. And also,
were they any good or have they spoiled?
Fantastic. No, they were not spoiled. And
pickles remain pickled.
Yes, and the garlic stems that he like the pickled garlic stems that you guys picked up, I guess, in little Ukraine in Chicago,
in Ukrainian village in Chicago.
Those were so good, and not so garlicky that you can't still make friends. So they're pickled garlic stems, and they're just so good.
It is fun walking around the Ukrainian village with Phil. He's mayor of Chicago down there.
That's right. That's totally true. So
it's fun meeting those people.
It is. It's great. Especially right now, one would say. You know, there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah. If anybody's in the Chicagoland region or somewhere in the Midwest or you're passing through Chicago, I highly encourage going to Ukrainian Village and drop in a few bucks. Because ultimately everything there is a percentage of it is coming here. So
that's right.
And it's just a great atmosphere. So
it
highly recommend it.
The food was fantastic. The place we ate at, I'm blitzing on the name right now, but I'll
Tryjob. It's Tryjob.
Tryjob, yes.
It's the Trident.
Because it's the Trident. Yes, the Ukrainian Trident restaurant. Food was so good, ridiculously good. I was mad that I had to leave to go to sound check for Sexy Liberal. Which, by the way, is a week from tonight in Chicago, in LA, and will be live streamed. So, reminding everybody, sexyliberal.com/tour. See, I'm doing business. Lots to talk about going on in Ukraine right now. I mean, let's catch up on. First of all, let me just defer to you in like your take on being back there and what the word on the street is like right out of the gate.
Sure, with the one caveat that I've been constantly traveling from LA to Michigan, Michigan to Chicago, Chicago to Warsaw, Warsaw to Lviv, Lviv to here. So I've been on the road a lot, and I've been paying attention, but not in finite detail as I usually do. But what I can speak to is my personal experience of coming back to Ukraine the week of the massive attacks that happened on Monday.
That's some timing.
And literally not 2 minutes. I drove, as I was driving to my apartment here from Lviv, I drove past one of the impact zones. It's not 2 minutes walk from here, right next to a park where there's a children's playground, and was damaged in the explosion. And, so it's very real. It's very real what they did on Monday. But having said that, the Ukrainians I talked to, they're not scared at all. They're not. There's no sense of fear. Like there's going to be a massive missile strikes, or even the fact that they might use an atomic weapon, they might use a nuke or something like that.
Right.
They're so past being afraid.
Yeah.
In this country, if the only thing. If it elicited one thing, let me put it this way: if it elicited one thing, it elicited anger.
Right.
They're just done with this. They're done with it. They're like, keep shooting at us. Just fine. Whatever you want to do, we're going to keep pushing back. We see advances in Kherson. We see advances in Luhansk. We see advances in Donetsk. The attitude that I've come up against is not. It's not fear, although they're not. They're human. They don't want to see their loved ones killed. They don't want themselves to die. They don't want to see their homes blown up. They're not detached from reality, but they're so beyond fear They're past the point of fear. They're indignant. They're angry. They're resilient. They're resolved. I mean, I saw a video this morning. One of the people that I'm on social media with posted a video of a 9-year-old child in the park that I was just talking about, 2 minutes walk from me here. And it's a Ukrainian television network, and they're asking the kid, were you here when the explosion happened? The kid says, yes, I was here. I never thought I'd see anything like this in my life. 9 years old. 9 years old. The interviewer asks him, yeah, but weren't you afraid when the explosion happened? And he pauses, he looks in the camera, and he says, no, I'm not afraid because I'm Ukrainian. And Ukrainians aren't afraid of anything.
Aww.
And it was just like, part of me was like, oh, wow, okay, these people can't be beaten. And part of me was like, a 9-year-old should not be saying stuff like this.
Right.
But, you know, the attitude, you know, out of the mouths of babes, the attitude is spot on in what I've encountered. And it is that, you know, do what you're going to do, Russia. Do what you're going to do, Putin. We're going to be here. You guys are, you're messed up. I have to remember we're on radio again.
Yes.
You guys are messed up. When we beat you in this war, which we will, this is the Ukrainian mentality, you will have to look in the mirror. You will have to do whatever you need to do to come to rights with what you've done. But we're going to be here when you're gone. We're not going anywhere, and we're always going to be Ukrainian, and we're never going to be under your thumb again. That's the result of the missile strikes on Monday. So if Vladimir Putin wanted to convey to these people, hey, don't touch our bridge, or don't take too much territory, or if you have a success on the battlefield, that this will be the result, the Ukrainians clearly have answered that by saying, doesn't matter. Right. You know, you do what you're going to do. We're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to take back our country.
One of the fascinating things I think that stood out this week, besides the fact that there have been these hits inside Belgorod, which is, and I would love for you to dig around and ask about this, but apparently there's a minor civil war going on inside Russia around the Belgorod region and the Kursk region, where they're just not, either they're firing on each other directly, or they're fighting over stuff, or they are just slapdash with the munitions that they're firing in and are not taking care to protect those around. It's an interesting story. I don't know how far it goes, but I would love to.
I saw the launch in Belgorod.
Yeah.
That went about maybe a kilometer at best, maybe half a kilometer, and then fell because the munitions are so faulty, fell right back into the city. So in essence, they bombed themselves. Yes. I have seen conscripts fighting amongst themselves for the better equipment, because the equipment that's being handed out, some of it is inoperable. I have seen conscripts actively perform basically a refusal to participate. Like 500 men. This was several days ago, but 500 men stopped at a train station for refueling and resupply. And these conscripts got off the train and sat down on the train platform and said, "We're not going any further. You've given us rusty rifles. You've given us faulty ammunition. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're doing. We aren't led very well. We're not going any further." Right. That's open mutiny, and you know it's just I've seen other videos of. Have you seen the video of the press gang in, I think, Petersburg? It might have been Rostov, where they're literally going into apartment building lobbies. And young men that they run into, either coming or going from their own apartments, are being grabbed. Yes. And you're off to the front. I mean, that's literally a press gang. Literally a press gang. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
There's a
it's all
falling
apart for the Russians.
Yesterday on one of the Telegram channels I follow that is supposed to be on Russia's side. And, you know, and not speaking Russian and having to translate everything that I look on there. I've gone and like kind of gathered Telegram channels to try and read against what's being said. And the mill bloggers are flipping out right now. They are turning on Putin, and, in frustration. They want to be more vicious. They want to win, but there's just no there there. And one of them posted.
Well,
video
they want to do Monday. They want to do Monday every day, which is not sustainable.
No, it isn't. And they, this week there was a one of these guys who's supposed to be out there going, look at our stuff, heading to the front lines, pointed out that they had artillery from World War II on.
Are those C-60 anti-aircraft?
Yeah. Which will not hit anything. Like they are basically they'll use them as short range artillery for taking out personnel because they're not going to hit anything. They're just going to fire munitions a distance. You know what I mean? It's a catapult. Yeah. They are basically using World War II technology as catapults. And they had like a dozen of them on this train, and the wheels and the bearings on them are completely rusted out. The tires are flat. They've just been sitting there. And the idea is that they're just going to drag them across the ground, creating rivulets in the land, and park them someplace, use them to fire until the barrel burns out. And then they'll just be air targets. It's bizarre. So yesterday, I wanted to bring this up because what's his name? Imamali Ramon, the Tajikistan president.
Oh yes, oh God, in Almaty.
Yeah,
in Kazakhstan.
So they were at this Central Asian summit, and he starts calling out Putin at this. At this thing, he goes, why do we have to beg Russia to attend some miserable forum in Tajikistan? I gave instructions to the foreign ministry. I even talked to you to ask Russia to attend at least at the ministerial level. No, at the level of deputy ministers. Is this what Tajikistan deserves, a strategic partner? We aren't 100, 200 million, but we want to be respected. Did we violate something? Did we greet each other inappropriately? There's no need to invest a lot of money in Tajikistan. Vladimir Putin, I ask you not to pursue a policy towards Central Asian countries as if they are the former Soviet Union, meaning we are not your lackeys anymore. We are self-sustaining countries. And if you want to invest, you act like an investor. You don't tell us where you're going to put the money and make us put it there. Because again, these guys are acting like state governors. We got to take a break. Let me take a quick break. And when we come back,
that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago.
And now Turkey, Azerbaijan, India, and Kyrgyzstan, and now the Tajikistan leader are all standing up Putin, making him, sit like a dope or wait for them to show up at these summit meetings, or calling him out in front of everyone. The only buddy he's got right now is Erdogan, because Erdogan just smiles all the time and knows he's got Russia over a barrel. We'll be back right after this.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
So it is really hard with our dear friend Philip Ittner on the line to not just start yammering about this stuff during the breaks and forget to save it for the air. So much,
which is all the more reason that the listeners should also do some, hop on and get the stream as well, because here's a little teaser for the next break. I have show and tell.
All right.
What could it be?
That's exciting. It's wrapped.
On the video.
Oh, I don't know.
Something's wrapped. Something will be unveiled.
Impressive.
So get on this. If you're listening and you can get onto the stream,
that's right.
The stream. There's my blatant plug.
I'm for it. There are a couple of things. So the Iranian drones, these Shahed 19 drones, Shahed 14, whatever they're 136s. That's what it is. The Shahed 136s. So Iran has just denied that they are supplying Russia with these drones, right as they invited Russia down there and showed them standing around as they launched a bunch of them off one of their little mini carriers that fire them into the sky. Now, the Shahed 136 reportedly sounds like a chainsaw when it's flying. It sounds like 3 diesel motorcycles running next to each other. It can fly 100 miles an hour at top speed when it's moving in to hit something, but when it hovers and loiters until it's ready to go down while they're looking for targets, it sounds like the whole time. And so Ukraine shot down 6 of them, I want to say day before yesterday. And right about the time Ukrainians going, yeah, these things were lucky because that Russia's using these things because they're really loud and they're slow, and cruise missiles travel like 1,000 miles an hour, and these things go 100 miles an hour. You can watch them through the sky. You can shoot them down with small arms fire. Guys can lead them with small arms fire and take them out with gunfire. And Iran's like, no, those aren't ours. They got them someplace else. Those aren't ours anyways. And then we get a report that Ukraine shot down 4 Ka-52 helicopters, Russian helicopters, in 18 minutes between 8:40 a.m. and 8:58 a.m. local time. These 4 helicopters were providing fire support, and all 4 of them got knocked out of the air.
Yeah.
Like this is, again, we're supposed to believe that Russia is the number 2, and they've lived up to that moniker, number 2 military in the whole world. They're the number 2 military, like China's the number 2 economy. And
one more thing about those Shaheeds is that so Russia apparently within the last, I want to say 24 or 48 hours, released a video which they say is nose cone video from one of these Shaheeds, kamikaze drones flying into a what's called a buk, a B-U-K. It's a armored fighting vehicle. Mm-hmm. And a buddy of mine who's a military expert pointed out a few things to me about this video. He said, firstly, when it hits the buk, when it hits the fighting vehicle, there's no secondary explosion, so there was no ammunition in the thing. And secondly, apparently they must have had another drone. Whether it was, maybe it wasn't. It's not
one filming it because it was
right. There's another one filming it. They showed the aftermath of the strike, and you can tell that there's something not right about it. It's not. It doesn't look like it's metal. It looks like it's burning in a different way, and like the
like
pieces
cardboard
have blown out differently than they would if it was actual proper armor. So the supposition that this military expert who, and again, I'm going to defer to him. So this is not my own supposition. This is him talking to me and analyzing the video that he saw. His point was either one, this was purely staged, and this was the Russians trying to show off we now have this great drone fleet. Or secondly, the Ukrainians tricked them, and they made him blow up a kamikaze drone on a plywood tank.
Which they've been doing. We know that they have fake HIMARS that they drive around, these trucks fitted to look like HIMARS, and then they fire with the HIMARS, move the HIMARS, and then leave the truck behind. And the Russians thought they had taken out, I think it was 4 initially. They were bragging they had taken out 4 HIMARS, and yet there was still the same number active on the battlefield, and they were having a hard time explaining that. And then it came out, of course, that they were blowing up these fake ones. Now
they're just being outclassed left, right, and center.
Mm-hmm. Hold on one second. I don't know why the video on him. No, you're good. We hear you. Fear not. But for some reason, this comes and goes on us a little bit. I have to jump to a different screen and then back again, and it comes live apparently on its own break. But there's this story that I wanted to bring up too, and this is really the question about where this goes going forward. Is the Vyacheslav Gladkov, the governor of Belgorod, has said that emergency workers have extinguished this fire at this warehouse that blew up in Belgorod, and he's blaming the Ukrainians for it. And the Ukrainians aren't taking credit for any of these things. And after the footage of these missiles flying short or their own issues with subterfuge and sabotage, is this just Russia trying to get the Russian people more angry about this so that they want to fight Ukraine? About the Putin's relation to the Russian apartment building fires that led to the Chechen war.
I was there. I was there.
So
Yeah.
he, many people, myself included, believe that those were false flags, or that he participated in allowing them to happen, was the idea, so that he could get people, riled up to go into the Chechen War and to also claim the, presidency, essentially. Because he was it 6-8 months later he was president? So
yeah.
Something like that.
This was him trying to spark. I mean, I was there for that, and I could tell you a story about it. I have no doubt in my mind. I spoke to people the day after the apartment building bombings happened, and I spoke to neighbors, and I spoke to. There's no doubt in my mind that it was they did it to themselves to stoke anti-Chechen. So if they're willing to do that to come to power, what else would they be willing to do to continue this war? Which in some ways is even more an existential threat than a breakaway Chechen republic would be.
Right.
So, it's entirely possible that they did it to themselves. It's also entirely possible that there's a growing, I don't want to call it an insurgency, but there's a growing
internal sabotage movement.
Internal sabotage. Russians. I mean, the Kerch Bridge. The Russians themselves are saying I think it's 8 or 9 people that were involved in that. 5 of them were Russian nationals. They were not dual nationals. They weren't Ukrainian Russians. They were Russians. There was five Russians, an Armenian, and I think 2 or 3 Ukrainians.
Right.
So
they've captured.
We've seen Russians throwing Molotov cocktails into registration
recruitment
centers
offices,
for the army.
Right.
It's there. It's not huge, I don't think, sadly, but it's there. It could absolutely be anti-Putin Russians who are doing this kind of stuff.
I like one of the stories too is since we were speaking about pickles earlier, I think this kind of deserves a take. Is this what's his name? I'm going to Igor. Well, I don't know why it's hard to remember Igor. Igor Girkin, who's one of the big Russian propagandists. Yeah, who's one of the people who he's been pushing for this war. He's one of their primary mouthpieces, which should be a lesson to all those mouthpieces out there about which side you're on and which side you're rooting for in this. Because this guy, they called him Warlord Gherkin, the pickle king of Chicago. No, this guy has been sent to the front line in a military uniform. He I guess they stopped. He stopped messaging on VK and all these other things on October 10th. His wife posted a picture of him in a uniform. Hadn't been heard from since. And
I mean, there are reports of guys who have been picked up in the mobilization, sent to Moscow for a day or 2 of training, are sent to the front lines in Ukraine, and I have seen a reliable source doing a timeline of at least one guy who, from mobilization to dying on the front line, 10 days.
Right.
So one day you're sitting at home, having lunch, and somebody knocks on the door, and 10 days later you're dead in Ukraine.
Right. When you didn't want to go in the first place.
How do you think that's going to go over? Yeah,
right.
When you didn't want to go over in the first place.
Yeah.
So how do you think?
And this guy's
Russians will put up with a lot, but 10 days from I'm sitting at home having a sandwich to I'm dead in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me about your kind of average Igor in Russia. You know what I mean? Rounding them up and sending them because, just like they're sifting through prisons to kick people out, and they're just finding the kind of slackers among them and sending them out, just kind of using it as a way to weed out the weak in their own society. Just run those guys to the front, let them catch bullets. But it is a big deal that Igor Girkin has been sent, because as mill bloggers go and as people who have supported this in social media goes, he's been one of the primary voices.
He's been high up there.
Yeah, it's like sending one of the people on Volodymyr Solovyov's shows to the front lines.
Yeah, and he's also I mean, he's been one of the guys calling for more aggressive warfare. He wants
he got his
bridges, power stations. He wants it all.
Then go do it yourself, apparently.
Right. Exactly. So
let us take a break.
I mean, yeah. Oh, and while we take the break, remember, if you're not watching the stream, get on the stream.
You'll watch. Yeah, you can check it later. There's going to be. We're going to have a show and tell. Very exciting from our dear friend Philip Ittner at Philip Ittner on Twitter. 1L 2 T's. And of course, he's in Kiev right now. Our own HSRPM correspondent and a man about town, Philip Ittner. More with him and Johnny Million and your questions from the chat after we come back.
You're locked into the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
All right, so during the break, while we were getting Johnny back in, our dear friend Philip Ittner is showing on the screen that he got a picture of Olga of Kiev. He got a poster with drones around her, I think Bayraktars or something flying around her.
Yeah.
And a real quick story.
That's going to take center part.
Yeah, real quick story.
Center place.
Olga of Kiev, queen of one of the earlier territories in that area, but long before these countries existed, when they were little kingdoms. And her husband goes to make a deal with the next country over. They kill him because they don't like his deal and messing around. And they send her a message: "You got to marry one of our princes, or we're going to kill you and your son, who you had with that old guy. He's never going to be king. Just get used to the idea." And she goes, "Okay, fine. Don't kill my people. Just send let's make this all nice. Otherwise, my people will rise up." And they send over the prince and his people. And she digs a big trench while they're on their way over. And all of his party fall into it. And she crucifies him. And before she slits his throat on the actual crucifix she's got him on, she makes him pen a note to his father, the king, and say, "Everything's great. Send over your all of our minister of agriculture and all this stuff, because they're going to have these meetings. There's so much land. It's going to be great. We're going to have all these deals." And they send over all the smartest people in that country. And she invites them all into a bathhouse because they've had a long journey. And while they're in there, all the pretty girls that were in the bathhouse with them all slip out at once. And somebody comes in and they pour oil on the water and set them all on fire. Then she sends a message to the king saying, "I've killed your son and all your people, and your country's going to fall apart. I'm coming over to take over. Be nice." And they go over, they take over the country, and she sends this message to his kingdom and says, "I'm going to be nice to you guys because you were so nice to me. All you got to do is bring me a turtle dove and a pheasant and to pay homage, and it'll be fine. And you'll just be part of my kingdom, and all's be good." And that's all. And everybody's like, "A turtle dove and a pheasant, this will be sweet." Unfortunately, turtle doves were the internet at the time, and you would use them to send messages. And so
basically a pigeon, a homing pigeon.
Exactly. So she took all the homing pigeons and they tied sulfur and black powder to their feet and sent them back to and let them all loose. And they basically burned the whole country down. Like you did not mess with her.
She was next level.
Yeah,
she was next level. And and the Ukrainians have been evoking her throughout this entire war. They've been evoking people like her, people like King Danilo.
Because the demands put on her are not unlike the demands Putin is making on Ukraine. We're going to take over. Right. You guys are going to get wiped out. Just get used to the idea. You're now our slaves. This is how it's going to work out. And she played him.
Yep. Well, and it brings me back to the other point that I've been making for months now, that this is not about NATO. This is Ukraine has been subjugated, has been a colony, has been messed with by greater powers at its doorstep for 500 years. This is this argument that this is because of NATO encroachment is ridiculous. What this is really all about is a country that is finally refusing to be colonized anymore. Yeah. And so they are bringing up all of their great Ukrainian fighters from history, whether it's Olga or whether it's Danilo or whether it's artists and writers like Ivan Franko or Taras Shevchenko. They're eliciting their Ukrainian national identity, which is something that the Russians have used in their propaganda by saying, "Look at these Ukrainian nationalists." Knowing that when an English-speaking ear hears the word nationalist, we think Nazi. When the Ukrainians say nationalist, they mean we should have a nation state. We have we have never had it since something like 900 AD. We have not had it since the sacking of Kiev by the Mongols. We have not had a kingdom, a nation, or whatever of our own. And so when they say I'm a Ukrainian nationalist, they mean I am a person who believes that Ukraine should be a nation. But the Russians are very smart about this. They're savvy because they've studied us, and they know how we react to statements like I'm a Ukrainian nationalist, because to our ear it sounds like Nazi. But it's not. It's not.
Right.
And
it's
just basically
and they have
we deserve
also
to be a nation.
Yes, and they feed into the Marjorie Taylor Greene crowd, where they try to make nationalist a bad thing over here, because we're in the United States, because of how we function as a country and the fact that we are not a racially homogenous country. When we mean nationalists, we mean constitutionalists. That while we have multiple cultures in this country as far as interpersonal social interactions and spiritual beliefs, we have a singular culture around the rule of law and constitutionality. There may be people who try to buck that on an individual or party level, but we all operate under the same legal framework and governance framework. That's our culture. We are a democratic culture. And the biggest fear, I think, for Vladimir Putin is that Ukraine wants to go that way as well. Ukraine is going to, and has built over the last, since Yanukovych was booted by that country, move towards a constitutional republic, much like every other European country. So a couple of things I want to bring up and get your take on them. The main one, I think, is Belarus. So there's been a lot of noise around, like putting troops at the Belarusian border, basically, I think, to draw forces away from the east and try to defend it, even though it's not going to happen. They've already covered that area. Nobody's coming across that anytime soon now, especially after the initial attack. The question is, and I'm just curious about what the word on the street is as far as, their belief about Ukraine.
Generally, Ukrainians are of the mind that the Belarusians will not come across the border. They think that for a number of different reasons, not least of which the fact that they know how precarious Lukashenko, the president there's grip on power is. And if he were to send troops into Ukraine, troops that he desperately needs internally within Belarus, because you have to understand that their security and their military and their army apparatus are actually kind of all mixed up into one. So if they start sending troops into Ukraine, that's just troops back in Belarus that aren't going to be able to put down any kind of uprising. And if you remember, about 2 years ago, they had a sham election, and Putin had to send support, or Lukashenko was going to be overthrown. So there's not a lot of concern about the Belarus physically coming across. There's a little bit of concern about maybe Russians coming into Belarus and then Russian troops coming down, which wouldn't put a burden on Lukashenko and his security. But that is kind of seen as unrealistic. It's not something they're terribly worried about because the Russian military has been so depleted. And then finally, when it comes to Belarus, there's another thing is that if they did calm down, let's say they crossed the border, and if any of you are looking at maps, Belarus's border primarily is in western Ukraine. That's the most kind of advantageous entry point for anybody coming to attack Ukraine from Belarus. It's kind of over in the western part of the country, which is where they send all of their frontline troops for R&R. So they've got brigades of Ukrainian experienced veteran soldiers out in the West sitting there doing what is considered, pretty easy duty of just manning border posts and stuff. That's seen as they're kind of like off the front line. If they're not directly for R&R, then they're getting cushy gigs like standing at a border post. But don't mistake that. Those guys are stone cold killers who have been out on the front lines for since 2014. They've been rotating these guys in. So if Russians were to come down the border from Belarus, or Belarus was stupid enough to send their own troops, they would be facing a bunch of guys who, yes, they're supposed to be relaxing and they're supposed to be off the front line, but all they have to do is gear up and they're ready to go.
Right.
So there's a defensive line waiting to be established in Western Ukraine at a moment's notice. So, it wouldn't be like they could sweep down and cut off. What they really want to do, Hal, what they would like to do is open that second front to not only divide the Ukrainian forces, but also to try and drive as deeply down into Western Ukraine that they could to try and stop the transportation of weapons and arms coming from Poland, NATO weapons and arms. They're never going to be able to do that.
No.
It's just not going to happen. If they can't take Kharkiv, if they can't hold on to Zaporizhia, they sure as heck are not going to be able to hold on to, Lviv or Western Ukraine. It's just the whole thing is.
Yeah, I don't see it.
A flight of fancy.
Exactly. I don't see it happening, but I also know that this is like you have to deal with it from a defensive standpoint if it's a possibility. Knowing that those troops are kind of already there means that they don't have to mobilize. Yeah. But you won't have to mobilize anybody who's on the front back to cover that area. And interestingly enough, excellent point that they are closer to Poland where the material's coming in. Your soldiers are not going to fare better when they're closer to the gear that is coming in. When you're talking about repelling forces with artillery and other stuff, if they don't have to travel as far. I mean, they're never going to have a shot there. But he is apparently, according to the Kiev Independent, Lukashenko's been doing this covert mobilization in Belarus, mainly covert because I don't think his people will go for it. The other thing is that we've seen this footage of tanks on a rail line in Belarus, and it looks like the stuff is leaving. It's going to Russia, or at least it's going to. It's moving south, into Russia and then south again out of Belarus. So what are they going to engage in this warfare with ultimately?
It's a tactic. I don't think it's a real threat.
Right.
So, and neither do many Ukrainians. I mean, I've spoken to Ukrainians about this. They're like, we're not terribly worried about it. We're not going to ignore it. But at the same time, we don't think it's a real threat. If they do you got it. I mean, look, this is going to sound to somebody who's not in a war zone, or who's never been to a war zone, or who doesn't kind of realize that it's not exactly black humor or dark humor. But I have spoken to a lot of Ukrainians who literally say, if they come, we'll kill them too.
Right.
I mean, literally is the attitude.
Well, they are. They're only coming
whatever
to kill
you're going to throw at us. Yeah, they would be.
There is no other reason.
Ukrainians, so in self-defense. Right. But it's the attitude of the 9-year-old that I began talking about. It's the attitude of people who are just like, you do what you're going to do. Do what you're going to do. Do your work. I mean, I say this kind of flippantly as a guest in the country, but I've heard this from Ukrainians. This attitude of like, do your worst. Do your worst. We've been at war with you now since 2014. We've been in an intense conflict for the last now almost 8 months. You're going to do what you're going to do. Send us your worst. We will kill them too. We're not giving up. When are you going to learn we're not giving up?
Right.
This is our country.
Yeah.
And their attitude is whatever you throw at us, we will destroy. We will beat whatever you throw at us. We beat your professional army. Throw at us what you want. And we'll beat it, and we'll still be here. Right. That's their attitude.
And I'm fascinated. We got to take a break. When we come back, the happy ending. And it's always a happy ending when we have Philip with us, especially when he's safe and sound. And Johnny Million, do you have a question or two that we can take at the top?
I do. I've got a couple. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. So we're good. We're going to take a break.
4.
Okay, we'll come back right after this, and we'll do a lightning round of questions with Philip Ittner. Don't forget to like and subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show, patreon.com/HalSparks. You can subscribe annually if you don't like doing monthly stuff, and Super Chats, always welcome. Any way you can help the show, keeps us on the air. Thank you so much. We'll be back right after this.
I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will I'll always be a funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky. Let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! See, we love playing that when Phil is on here with us, and we got 4 questions. Let's get to them right out of the gate.
We do. All right. So Nick Rich 56 says, "Does Phil's new sign-off mean as much to Ukrainians as it sounds?"
They love hearing me say it. My new sign-off is no longer Slava Ukrainia, which I will continue to say, so I haven't put it out to pasture. But my new one is Skora Peremocha, which is basically soon there will be victory. And the Ukrainians are tickled by it every time I say it. I went and I changed some money, and I said that to the lady, and she said, yeah, from your lips to God's ears.
Right.
Right on. Cool. So this one, forgive me if I stumble over this a bit. It's from Sandra Robinson.
Can't hear you, Johnny.
Have you or Phil heard how our Bushmasters going in cold, no Ukrainians love them, took direct hit, no one injured, was amazeballs, the soldiers can live in them?
Bushmaster.
The Bushmaster vehicles? I'm presuming that's what you're talking about.
Follow-up questions are tricky in these.
Yeah, I know. No, I suspect they're talking about the fighting vehicles. I mean, look, they're, the West is finally waking. Even the Europeans who may have dragged their feet are starting to realize that they need to send every piece of available equipment that they can. Now the Germans are finally getting their act together in a lot of different ways. They've run hot and cold, but they're starting to send in what they really need right now, which is anti-aircraft and aircraft defense missiles. Because clearly that's the next thing that Putin said he's not going to do it again, at least not now, but you better bet that when they start putting pressure on Kherson, which, by the way, at some point we'll talk about, maybe on Wednesday, Hal, on your show, on your online show, Kherson is going to fall. Yes. We'll talk about it in greater length on Wednesday.
To the Ukrainians, who will drive out the Russians.
It will fall. It's going to fall to the Ukrainians. The Russian puppet who is in control of occupied Kherson is already asking Russian forces to evacuate. And he says it's not an evacuation. We just want to take people from Kherson and show them the loveliness of Russia. So can you help them get out of the city? Right. It's just, the delusional aspect of this is crazy. But the more territory that the Russians lose, the more possibility they might try to do another thing like what they did on Monday, which is just indiscriminate mass attacks. Mm-hmm. And I think the Europeans have woken up to that fact, and they're going to get good anti-aircraft air defense systems.
I'd like to say, if I may, that the Bushmaster is from Australia, so I don't know
that's the Aussie thing.
Looks
like an MRAP.
Yeah, but apparently they're very popular with the Ukrainians. They love them. They say they strike like snakes, which is something that Australians should. Yeah, Struth. That the Ukrainians have said.
I'll punch you like a roo.
Yeah, it's like a dingo that takes your baby. No, it's but they, in all honesty, the Ukrainians love the Australian Bushmaster armored vehicle, and it has been a big part of their lightning strikes, which are these really bold moves they've made that have punched through. Once they punched through the Russian line, they realized lately that there is no there on the other side of it. So they just they race through to the supply line for whoever's supplying the front and destroy that too. And that's been why they've gained over 6,000 kilometers in the last month.
I wish we had time to talk about it, but they have been blowing up ammo dumps.
All over the place.
Seriously damaging.
Thanks to those Bushmasters and how fast they are. Now, next question. So I don't want to lose the time.
Next question from Connie Kelly is asking, my Polish cousins say Russian conscripts are defecting into Poland at last near Lublin. Has Philip heard anything about this?
I've heard about them defecting. I haven't heard about them going to Poland. I've heard about them flooding into other regions. I've heard about them going to Lithuania because actually not to stay in Lithuania because the Lithuanians are definitely scared of a sudden influx of fighting age men who might be pretending to be peaceniks, fleeing mobilization, but who could then, at the very least, become voting citizens within Lithuania and change the dynamic of the political scene there. So the Lithuanians are not terribly thrilled with it, but a lot of them who are fleeing into Lithuania are actually going there just to get to the airport and to buy a ticket to Cyprus at $500 instead of $10,000, which is what they're going for in Russia, if indeed you're even allowed to get on the plane in Russia. So they're just using Lithuania as an escape point. Now the Estonians have indicated they're going to close the border. And I feel for the Estonians. I understand that mentality. A lot of people have been it's been controversial because a lot of Europeans are saying we got to let these people come out because otherwise they will be conscripted. They'll be forced into uniform and just get them out of Russia if they don't want to fight. Well, that's all well and good, but one of two things. If you're a member of the Baltic states and suddenly you get this massive influx of Russian men, that's not good.
Nope.
That's fraught with danger. And secondly, and this is where I actually have a strong sense of agreement with the argument against letting people out of Russia because they're afraid of being mobilized. My feeling about that is you didn't give a good gosh darn while women and children were being killed and Bucha was being massacred, and you didn't care about that.
Yeah, you didn't leave the country then.
The second there was mobilization, you went running for the door and saying that, taking the high road and saying, "Oh, I don't want to kill Ukrainians," but you were perfectly fine when they were raping children and they were. Yeah. No, sorry. You stay and fix your house.
I think a unified European response should be: we are closing our borders to people leaving Russia, even if they are, trying to avoid conscription and these kind of things. But if they leave through another country, if they go through Kazakhstan or any of those other states or whatever and can find their way to relatives and stuff, that's a different thing. But if you're coming directly across the border from Russia into our land, forget about it. And Estonia definitely has that issue.
Yeah, like so many different things, there's nuance to it, and it's a complicated question. But I can't get away from, and I had this conversation again with lots of Ukrainians who feel the same way. It's like, you guys didn't care. You guys didn't care for 6-7 months.
Yeah.
You didn't care what was
now
being
that
done
it's you.
here.
Now that it's
you, suddenly you're gonna be all holier than
and
thou.
then what'll happen when you want the benefit of getting back into Russia? What do you have to do to buy your way back into Russia in the country that's been having you for a while? Do you have to do a small act of sabotage? Do you have to, kill one of the citizens there? Like, this is Putin we're talking about.
Or even just vote for pro-Moscow parties.
Right.
It's
grab another question.
really problematic, but it's not good.
We got a couple minutes left, so let's grab another question real quick.
Yep, so we've got from Treva Joan. Could you please ask Philip, how did he get to where he is? Isn't there an issue with travel to where he went? What was it like?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to be intermediary, Hal. I can't hear Johnny.
Okay, they're asking like what the travel was like. How do you get from America to to where you are in Ukraine, the process and what it's like?
Well, I'm not going to lie. This time it was exhausting. So what I did was I flew from, let's just take it from my last point of departure in the States. I left Chicago. I took a direct flight from Chicago to Warsaw. Mm-hmm. And then I was met by a friend of a friend who had a car, and I threw him a few bucks, and he drove me from Warsaw in a Ukrainian plated car, because you cannot drive without the proper papers. You can't drive Polish license plate cars because there's a huge black market for them. Nor can you drive a rent-a-car for obvious reasons.
Right.
So I had to find a Ukrainian who was willing to drive to Warsaw, pick me up at the airport, and then drive me back to Lviv. And luckily enough, I was able to find one who did that. So it was about an 8-hour drive from Warsaw to Lviv, and I was plumb tuckered out. So I stayed an extra couple of days in Lviv to recharge my batteries. And then I drove from Lviv to Kiev today, which is about a 7-hour drive. I didn't have any problem except for there was a minor hiccup on the border between Poland and Ukraine because I have so many Ukrainian stamps that they're like, why do you keep coming and going from our country? What are you doing? And so I showed them my press accreditation, and they, after a little bit of humming and hawing and delay of about an hour, hour and a half, they finally let me through. And so then I was in Lviv for 2.5, 3 days, came here today. It's a long journey. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It would be a lot easier just to fly from London to Kiev, but that's not happening anytime soon.
Right.
But it's an arduous journey.
Right. We're at the end of the show. Thank you so much, Philip, for being with us today. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for joining us. Johnny Million, we love you. Thank you for shepherding through these things. And I will see you guys next week. Philip, we'll try and get him on this Wednesday on my morning show. I will be doing that from LA because I'm at Flappers. And thank you, Chicago. And we'll see you guys next week. And we're right up against the hour. And there we go. And okay, bye.